Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. My name is Dharmini. This is my husband, Dharmaraj, and we're going to be moving here in August.
Yay!
We're very happy to be here, and we hope to get to know each and every one of you. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Today's reading is Self-Effort 2 is Needed. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. These past weeks, we discussed the need for balancing self-effort with receptivity to divine grace. Both are important in the spiritual life. Passive dependence on grace hasn't the magnetism to attract grace. Boastful self-confidence, however, which closes itself off from the higher divine power, is shallow, brittle, and given life's many uncertainties, susceptible to ultimate failure. There is a story in the Bible that illustrates the need to put forth personal effort so as to draw magnetically on the divine power. The story occurs in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 8. But as he went, the crowds nearly suffocated him. Among them was a woman who had had a hemorrhage for 12 years and who had derived no benefit from anybody's treatments. She came up behind Jesus and touched the edge of his cloak. As a result, her hemorrhage stopped immediately. "Who was it who touched me?" Jesus asked. When everyone denied it, Peter remonstrated, "Master, the crowds are all around, pressing you on every side." But Jesus said, "Somebody touched me. I felt power going out from me." When the woman realized that she had not escaped notice, she came forward trembling and fell at his feet and admitted before everyone why she had touched him, adding that she had been instantaneously cured. "Daughter," Jesus said, "it is by your faith that you have been healed. Go in peace." Self-confidence and self-effort are necessary, as the ignition of a car is necessary to the motor. Of what use the ignition, however, if the motor itself will not work? Wise is he who recognizes the real power in the universe and guides his life by the supreme power. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 9th chapter, "To those who meditate on me as their very own, ever united to me by incessant worship, I make good their deficiencies and render permanent their gains." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dharmaraj, as you already heard, and welcome. And yet, I feel like you all are welcoming us too. It really does feel that way, so we're very glad to be here. This topic of self-effort versus grace, putting out our own energy versus faith, is a crucial one for us on the spiritual path. I am reminded, though, of a story of the difference between faith and self-effort, of a man named Joseph who found himself in a flood, and he was in his apartment at the top floor, and as the water level started raising, a boat went by and said, "Hey, buddy, get in the boat. It's flooding." And he said, "God is with me. He will save me." The guy said, "You're crazy," and went away. And the water level kept rising, and then this time a second boat came by and said, "Hey, over there, get in the boat." And he said, "I am with God. He will save me." So this guy went away too. Finally, the water level had reached his balcony, And he was unconcerned. God would save him. And so at this point, a helicopter came by and said, "You down there, grab this rope." And we were very accustomed to helicopters here in Los Angeles. And he said, "I'm with God. Don't worry." And so, unfortunately, or fortunately, or however you look at it, the water level rose further, and that was it for Joseph. So he kind of came to, finding himself in heaven, and there was the Lord. And he said, "Lord, I had total faith in you, and you didn't help me." And the Lord said, "Joseph, I sent 2 boats and a helicopter." So we have to, of course, balance both of these. And it's easy, though, to, when we are having lots of faith, I hope by faith this will work, and then it doesn't work, and then, okay, now it's time for self-effort. And it's not so much an either-or choice. Should I do one or the other? It's working both together. For example, we had an experience this morning. We were running a little bit late, and so we sort of scurried out of the hotel finally and got to the car, which was at the other end of the lot, and got to the parking gate, and then we have, of course, little tickets or entry and exit out of the parking at the hotel. And the person in front of us went out and left their ticket in the thing, the little, chomper, whatever it is. And so we, pulled it out, and Dharmaraj, "Excuse me, you," and unconcerned, the person drove off. And so she kind of rested it on the meter or the box, and then it blew away. And then we put ours in. So we put ours in again, a little more enthusiastically. And though I was telling myself, faith versus self-effort, be calm, be composed, I started to fidget a little bit. So we pressed the intercom button. Hello, hello. So then she says, "Get that ticket." And the ticket had landed on the hood of our car. And so I ran out and I grabbed the ticket and boom, and off we went. So it wasn't the effort necessarily that got that gate open, but somehow the gate did open after all. Yogananda said of the need for self-effort when he was once helping a disciple. Often he would encourage this disciple to improve himself in some particular quality. And the disciple said, "Master, I want to improve, but how can I do so without your blessings?" And Yogananda said, "My blessings are there, God's blessings are there. It's your blessings that are lacking." And that encouragement in us to say, okay, if something needs to shift, what can I shift in myself? Gyanamata, Yogananda's most advanced woman disciple, said, "Change not my circumstances, change me." And yet, Yogananda talked of God as his divine mother, and Swami Kriyananda does as well. I also like to think of God that way. And I think that Divine Mother kind of makes these little exercises for us, basically just to see if we'll freak out. And this, thing at the parking gate was a perfect example. Just like, the gate's not going to go up. How does that feel? Are you going to freak out? What are you going to do? Stay in your center under all circumstances. It's a parking gate. It's not some big, huge thing. It's like, what do I do? And so, and she likes to do this in our lives, to kind of just see, okay, which way are we going to go? And the answer isn't always the same. Sometimes you are supposed to just put all your energy into meditation. I find that sometimes. It's just get to the center and shift the energy that way. And sometimes you're supposed to run around like crazy, shaking up this universe. And so she likes to have fun with us. As Haridas likes to say, Divine Mother has a good sense of humor. She's a funny lady. And he also, speaking of that, he also said that in terms of creating chaos in our lives to just see how we'll do, She often grabs the finances because she knows that'll get our attention. But the thing to remember that I try to remember, and I'll tell you a little story about this, is that often she has a much greater outcome, a much more beneficial outcome in mind. But she makes it look like it's the worst possible thing that could happen. Exactly that thing we don't want to happen is what happens, and then it's all upon us. So I had an experience like this when we were living in India. I was running a business, or trying to, and we had an accountant, and the accountant and I were kind of having a difference of opinion because he felt that he had done these 10 things and that he should be paid for those 10 things. And I had felt that of those 10, he had done 2, which did learn out to later to be true, in fact, and that I would rather only pay for those 2 things until the other 8 were finished. To complicate matters, the address for our business was the accountant's office, because when you're starting a business in India, you need an official address, and if you haven't rented a place, the accountant says use the address of my building, and so you're kind of a naive foreigner, and you don't necessarily know better, and you find out later. And so we had finally, I was working with Haridas at the time, and we had finally done a workshop for a cell phone company, Vodafone. Like they own part of Verizon Wireless here, but they don't operate with that name. So finally, some cash was coming in, and it was going to help with all of our bills that were piling up. All the creditors, like Haridas said, waiting like crocodiles. And so, but we were fine. We were unconcerned. This check was coming, and it was great. And on our letterhead, we had to put our official address, but I said repeatedly, please don't send it there. Please send it to this address where I actually live, which is an hour and a half away from this other building. So I said it in the email. I said it on the phone. I said it repeatedly in multiple emails just to check, just as a reminder. This is the address. No problem, sir. So I finally get the email. Check has been sent. I said, thank you. We sent it to your Delhi address. And I had been thinking about this topic of Divine Mother Earth. She always makes it look like it's bad and it's really good. And this came up, and I thought, not only is it going to the wrong address, not only is it, could he hold it hostage, but even the fact that he thinks, according to him, I owe him money, this is really like squirmy. So I was not feeling very reverential in that moment. And I said, Divine Mother, I dare you to show me how this could turn out for the best. And I meant it, and I didn't even think, well, is there a lightning bolt coming to just... I really meant it. It was a challenge, and it was my frustration. So, I start to call the accountant. No answer from the accountant. And I figured because he probably sees it's me, so I send him SMS, Dear Sir, could you call me back when you get a chance? And a few days go by, and I call my contact at this company, Vodafone, and I said, no, I didn't call him. He sent me an email and said, by the way, that's right, we were in Delhi. Haridas and I were in Delhi on some sales call, and I got a call or an SMS or text message from this guy at Vodafone saying, the check came back because it was undeliverable to that address. And I said, oh. He said, why don't you just come by my office and pick it up? I have it right here. So I went, oh. So, and we were about 20 minutes away from his office, which with Delhi traffic, I mean, I don't like San Francisco traffic, but even with Carmageddon and everything, Delhi traffic is... So we were 20 minutes away, so we just popped over. And we were already dressed in our little suits and ties, and so it was just no problem. We just walked in. And he just sat us down, and he talked all about how the previous program had helped us and how he thought this would help the rest of, the other offices around the country, and how he was going to actually refer us to the nationwide, people who decide, which in fact he did do, and we did do a number of workshops later for the different offices around the country. And even if that didn't happen, if you know, anytime in sales, any reason for the client to call you for a visit is just gold. I mean, it was fantastic. And on top of that, just as a nice epilogue, that same man, later called us up and said, I've been wondering about all this thing you teach, this Hongsan, this energization, and I saw this autobiography of a yogi, and I read that book, and I want Kriya Yoga. And about 3 weeks ago, he had his Kriya initiation, because it was about a year ago. So sometimes what Divine Mother has in mind as the best outcome may not always be, in fact, it was the best outcome for us, but it was also the best outcome for him. So we never know where she's sending us as little ambassadors. Someone coined the phrase at Ananda, Divine Mother's secret agents. Sometimes we're secret agents on missions that are unknown even to us. But we're going there into the world to help people. So this balance between self-effort and grace, what I find tricky about it is that when the grace doesn't seem to be, on tap, doesn't seem to just be coming, then I resort to self-effort and just kind of, okay, I got to figure this out. I'm going to work it out. And Divine Mother's saying, I can help. No, I'm busy right now trying to solve this. And then the other side of it is that if we do solve it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I worked it out. See? And so it can reinforce that need. Like, okay, everything's fine, but this is serious. And I'm reminded also of another little story of a farmer who inherited some land from his uncle and went to see it, and it was all just, completely overgrown, hadn't been farmed in maybe 100 years, and so he went there in the fall and started digging up the rocks and clearing out the dead trees and making a space and then tilling the land in through the cold into the spring. Creating it ready to be tilled, I should say. Finally, in the spring, he planted the crops, and then after a year, he had this beautiful farm and kind of sculpted land. And then the parish priest came out and said, "Oh, what a beautiful garden, beautiful land you and God have created." And the farmer said, "Well, Father, you should have seen it when the Lord had it all to himself." And we can kind of feel that way, like, look what I did. It's very tempting. And so I love this story of, actually taking one step back, we had a Kriya initiation last night, and it was a very sacred moment, and it was a beautiful one. And thank you, Vidura and Durga, for putting it on. And Kriya, in a way, is very symbolic of the need for self-effort. The techniques of Kriya, the techniques of yoga in general. It's one of the things that's so attractive, or at least was to me, about this path, that here was something I could do as a science and see if it worked. I didn't have to just believe. I didn't have to even have, belief, because faith is born of experience. Belief is just born of maybe hope. But faith is when you've tested your belief and seen that it works. So I loved practicing these techniques, and I found that they did work. And I was a little nervous leading up to my Kriya initiation about whether Kriya would work for me, because I'd had a hard time meditating. And I went through with it, and the first night I practiced Kriya, it worked. There was something entirely different from my experience before. But that even Kriya, even these techniques, there's a talk that Master gives where he says the line, it's an audio recording, practice your Kriya, and through your Kriya, as I awaken you. See, as I, meaning him, as he awakens us. It isn't that we practice Kriya and kind of lift ourselves up by our shoelaces up into the divine. All we do is open to receive that grace that's wanting to rush in. As Swami said in the reading that Dharmini read, our self-effort is the key in the ignition, but it's the engine that's running the whole show. But still, without the key, then nothing happens. So this story in the reading of the woman who was healed from the hemorrhage is such a beautiful story to me, especially after having been to India, because you see crowds of people like that. They do numbers really well in India. They nothing like here. Not a drop. And then that's even in some cities. If you go to Calcutta, it's the most populated city in India. So it's like India's India in terms of population. So you see so many people, so many souls. And I can now visualize a crowd just swarming him, and people would swarm Swami too as well when he was in India, just trying to touch his feet, just trying to get any blessing of his. We were actually surprised, having been in India, seeing him in Los Angeles at one of the big events, and when it was time for him to leave, he just said thank you and just walked out. And in India, it was like we had to have 3 people walking in front of him just to create space. And still people would get in because they just said, I want to receive that blessing. You are close to that which I want. And they would literally touch the hem of his robe or try to touch his feet. And he was very happy for him to. It was just the rest of us that were concerned about him, tripping or falling or something. So that woman touched Jesus, and she was healed. And that was it. He didn't say, kind of like a loan officer, well, why don't you sit down and show me the reason why you need to be healed and what you've done to deserve it. Which is sometimes how I feel when I'm praying to God. I try to make a good case. But that's not how she's looking at it at all. She just, Divine Mother isn't looking at it that way, and this woman too. Jesus didn't say, well, I'll think about it. If you're good, he said, you are good. And in fact, the way the story is told, he didn't apparently have any awareness of it, though of course we know he did, but he was illustrating a point. And that healing went right out to her. And he said, it's by your faith that you've been healed. I wanted to tell one other story in closing like that, because you could say, well, that's a beautiful story, and it was good that in those days those things happened. But there was a time in Ananda village, and I'm sure Durga and Verdur were there at that time, and Ram probably too, that their Swami had an old car, and which was actually had written Air Force on it, because that's what the previous owners had on it, so it was nicknamed Air Force One. And he got into the habit of riding a little moped. And because he thought, well, driving around the village, why damage my car and why use up gas? So I'll ride this moped. And so going back and forth every day, though, there was one stretch of the dirt roads that you had to go just the right speed. Because if you went too fast, you could lose control. And if you went too slow, you could lose traction and then fall. And he would ride the moped with a straight spine in his Bermuda shorts and in his all the time, just back and forth commuting, so to speak. So he, one day, was going too slow, and it fell. And he wasn't going super fast, but when it fell, the exhaust pipe landed right on his leg and burned his leg and pinned his leg underneath. So to try to get out, he had to pull himself out, which then ground dust and dirt into this burn. So to make matters worse, when he got home, people saw this happen and brought him home, and he said, it'll be fine. And so people gave him 3 or 4 little remedies of different things that would help it, and it was, by a few days later, it was swollen, infected, all the nightmare that you can imagine with a burn. So finally he went to a physician, and they said, well, despite how bad this looks, if you do this, take this drug and do this kind of treatment, it will heal. So that, about a few days later, or a week later, at a Sunday satsang at his house, he was sitting there, and he had to leave the wound uncovered and to open air. So he had his foot up, and so it was just sitting there. It was right in front of everybody. And during the Saturday satsang, a man came in who was a student of Swami's. His name was Ram Leela. And this story, you could tell the whole story about Ram Leela. I've never even seen a picture of him, but I've heard of him because he had one of these bangles that he couldn't wear around his arm. They were saying actually it would take 2 bangles to fit around his arm. And it was not fat, it was muscle. He was actually a former Hell's Angel biker. So he wore this bangle around his neck, just on a little string. And they said if you want to get an idea of what his arms look like, then just look at someone's thigh, and that was his arms. He was a very strong guy, very devoted to Swami. And Ram Leela, of course, means the play of the divine, the play like a, theatrical play. So it apparently suited him very well. He came in and said, I should be dead. I should be dead right now. He said, I was on the bike, truck came out of nowhere, bam! And as I flew right over the handlebars, and I thought to myself, that's it, I'm dead. My shoulder, my back, my head, and I kind of blinked, and I was fine. I wasn't wearing a helmet, and I walked away. So everyone, then after this, people started kind of, Swami even said, I'm so glad you're not dead. And everybody kind of laughed because, it was all over. And then he said, what happened to your leg? And Swami told him. And he said, when was that? And Swami told him, it was Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And he started trembling. He said, that's when I was hit. He said, I have no idea why I'm still alive. I had no idea why I was. You saved me. And he just started weeping. So we never know about these things and what's going on behind the scenes. But we do know, just as that woman who reached for the hem of Jesus' robe, that grace is there, as Swami has used the illustration. It is the sunlight shining on the side of a building, on a window, from the outside. And all we need to do with all of our self-effort and dynamic willpower, we don't have to build the building or make the sun. We just have to open the curtains, and that sunlight comes in. And so let us make a vow individually to open the curtains of our heart for Divine Mother. She's desperate to get in. That's a thought I like sometimes. She's desperate to get through to me. And all we have to do is just open to her. I'd like to close with a reading from Whispers. Make me see that I am but an actor in thy cosmic motion picture. Beholding the ever-changing sound and motion pictures of life, I am aware that this turbulent dancing show is only a vast illusion. The tragedies, comedies, and paradoxes of life, the dreams of birth and death, the changing scenes and places that surge round us, all these are nothing but movies designed to engage us in the cosmic illusion. O divine operator, with thy cosmic vibratory light thou dost show us ever new thrills, a motion picture true to all our 5 senses, keeping us amused and entertained through sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. O magic operator, thy seeming spectacle beams daily onto the screens of our consciousness. I take it as thy grace that I've been chosen to play both tragic and comic parts in thy drama. I am happy to have acted all those parts, both of sorrow and of joy. Still, Father, give me now and then a few days of respite from my task. Let me retire to my closet of introspection, stand before my own thought audiences, and behold with laughing heart all the tragedies and comedies I have enacted. Teach me to look upon all that happens in my life with a pleased, interested attitude, that at the end of each episode, no matter how sad or difficult, I may exclaim, "Ah, that was a good show, full of thrills, suspense, and excitement. I am happy to have seen it, and I have learned much from it for my own benefit."